The late afternoon sun, usually so warm and inviting, cast long, eerie shadows across the manicured lawn of our new house. It was a beautiful place, a real gem that seemed untouched by time. Amazingly preserved, the real estate agent had gushed, her voice echoing in the grand, empty rooms. And she wasn't wrong. The house had a certain old-world charm. Everything from the intricately carved banister to the surprisingly vibrant wallpaper looking like it had been put up yesterday, not decades ago. My husband, Tom, was already wrestling with a stubborn moving box in the living room, his forehead furrowed in concentration. Our two kids, 10-year-old Lily and 7-year-old Max, were tearing through the house like excited puppies, their delighted shrieks echoing off the high ceilings. It should have felt like a dream come true, our fresh start in this perfect house after years of city living. But even then, a tiny, icy sliver of unease had begun to worm its way into my gut. The house belonged to an old woman, a Mrs. Elenor Vance, who had, as the agent delicately put it, passed away in an unfortunate automobile incident. It was a euphemism, I knew, for a car crash. The agent hadn't elaborated, and honestly, I hadn't pushed. We just wanted a good deal on a decent house, and this one was practically a steal. The fact that it was so well maintained, almost unnervingly so, just added to its appeal. It was as if Mrs. Vance had simply stepped out for a moment, expecting to return. The first few days were a blur of unpacking, arranging furniture, and trying to get a handle on the sheer amount of space we now had. The kids loved their new rooms, each with a quirky little nook or a window seat. Tom was busy setting up his home office, and I was trying to make sense of the surprisingly extensive pantry in the kitchen. It was during this time that the little things started happening. It began innocently enough. I'd come downstairs in the morning and find a kitchen chair slightly moved, not much, just enough to catch my eye. I'd straighten it, assuming one of the kids had bumped it in their morning rush. Then, the next day, it would be a throw pillow on the living room sofa, placed at an odd angle, or a book on the shelf that I was sure I had put back differently. Tom would just shrug, attributing it to our collective exhaustion, and the kids were too wrapped up in their new surroundings to notice. But I noticed. I always noticed. One evening, I was tucking Lily into bed, reading her a story about a brave princess. As I got to the end of the chapter, I noticed the antique rocking chair in the corner of her room, a beautiful old piece we'd found in the attic. It was gently rocking back and forth, ever so slightly, with no one in it. I paused, my heart giving a little flutter. "Lily," I whispered, "did you just get out of the rocking chair?" She looked up at me, her eyes wide with sleep, and shook her head. "No, Mommy. I haven't touched it." I told myself it was just the house settling, maybe a draft, or even just my imagination playing tricks on me in the dim light. I pushed the chair to a stop and finished the story, but the image of it rocking on its own stayed with me. The noises started a few nights later. At first, it was subtle. A creak of floorboards when no one was walking. A soft rustling sound from the hallway, like silk whispering against itself. I'd wake up, my ears straining, but the sounds would always vanish the moment I became fully alert. Tom, bless his ability to sleep through anything, never heard a thing. I'd lie there in the dark, my breath held, listening to the silence, which somehow felt heavier, more oppressive, than the sounds themselves. Then came the footsteps. Light, almost hesitant footsteps, pacing across the floor of the room directly above ours, the master bedroom that Mrs. Vance had occupied. I knew it wasn't Max, who slept like a log, or Lily, who usually announced her nocturnal bathroom trips with a dramatic yawn. These steps were different. They had a distinct rhythm, a soft, deliberate tread, like someone deep in thought. I tried to convince myself it was the wind, or the house settling, or even just our old pipes making strange noises. But deep down, I knew better. One morning, I went into the kitchen to make coffee, and found the cupboard door above the sink wide open. I was sure I had closed it the night before. Inside, the mismatched set of teacups we rarely used was perfectly aligned, something I definitely hadn't done. I stared at them, a chill creeping up my spine despite the warmth of the rising sun. It was as if someone had been meticulously organizing them and then just left. "Tom," I said that morning, trying to keep my voice light, "have you been rearranging the kitchen cupboards?" He looked up from his breakfast cereal, a spoonful of Cheerios halfway to his mouth. "Me? No way, honey. You know I can barely find a spoon in this place." He chuckled, oblivious to the growing unease tightening in my chest. I didn't press it. What was there to say? Our house is haunted by an overly organized ghost. The incidents escalated. Objects would be moved from one room to another. Max's favorite teddy bear, which he always left on his bed, would appear on the living room sofa. Lily's hairbrush, last seen on her dresser, would turn up in the kitchen sink. It was as if someone was playing a very subtle, very unsettling game with us. One particularly unsettling evening, I was in the dining room, wiping down the antique sideboard. It was a beautiful piece, dark wood with intricate carvings. As I polished, I felt a sudden draft, even though all the windows were closed. The air in the room grew heavy, a strange, sweet scent, like dried lavender and old potpourri, filled my nostrils. I shivered, instinctively looking around. Nothing. But then, as I continued polishing, I saw it. In the reflection of the highly polished wood, behind me, a fleeting image. A pale, wispy figure, vaguely human-shaped, with what looked like a bun of white hair. It was there for a split second, then gone. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. The room was empty. The sweet scent lingered, and the air still felt heavy. I knew then, with a terrifying certainty, that we weren't alone. I tried to tell Tom, really I did. "I think there's something in this house with us," I stammered, my voice trembling. He looked at me, a worried frown creasing his forehead. "Honey, you've been under a lot of stress. New house, new town, the kids. Maybe you're just a little overtired." He pulled me into a hug, comforting and warm, but his words didn't ease my fear. They just made me feel isolated, like I was losing my mind. The first time I saw her clearly, I was downstairs, folding laundry in the utility room. The room was small and dim, tucked away at the back of the house. I had just pulled a pile of clean towels from the dryer when I heard a soft sigh behind me. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. Slowly, very slowly, I turned. And there she was. An old woman, standing in the doorway. She was small, frail-looking, with a severe bun of white hair pulled back from a wrinkled, pale face. She wore a simple, dark dress, the kind you might see in old photographs, and a small, delicate lace collar. Her eyes, though, were what truly held me. They were a watery blue, staring straight at me, unblinking, filled with an ancient, sorrowful gaze. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. My breath caught in my throat. She just stood there, watching me. There was no menace in her gaze, no overt threat, but an overwhelming sense of presence. It was as if she had simply materialized from the very air around her. Then, as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. One moment she was there, the next, the doorway was empty, as if she had simply dissolved into thin air. I stumbled back, my legs suddenly weak, and sank onto the floor, the clean laundry scattering around me. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake Tom and the kids and demand we leave, but the words wouldn't come. I just sat there, shaking, tears silently streaming down my face. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly got up, my body still trembling. I made my way upstairs, my eyes darting around, half expecting her to reappear. I found Tom in his office, engrossed in his computer. He looked up, a smile on his face. "Hey, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." The irony of his words hit me like a physical blow. "I think I just did," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He chuckled. "Come on, honey." "Really? What did you see? A floating bedsheet?" I shook my head, my eyes burning. "No. Not a bedsheet. I saw her. The old woman. I saw Mrs. Vance." His smile faltered, replaced by a look of concern. "Honey, you're really scaring me now. Are you feeling all right?" I knew then that I was on my own. He wouldn't believe me. He couldn't. How could anyone believe something so outlandish? The sightings became more frequent, more brazen. She would appear in the living room, standing by the fireplace, her gaze fixed on the framed family photos on the mantelpiece, almost as if she were studying us. Sometimes, she would be in the kitchen, by the old wooden hutch, her translucent fingers seemingly tracing the patterns on the china. She never spoke, never made a sound beyond that initial, soft sigh, but her presence was undeniable. It wasn't just me anymore. The kids started seeing her too. One afternoon, Max came running to me, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear. "Mommy! There's a lady in my room." She was just standing there, looking at my train set. My blood ran cold. "What did she look like, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "Old," he whispered, "with white hair. And she looked really sad." I hugged him tight, trying to reassure him, but my own fear was a tangible thing, a cold knot in my stomach. Later that day, Lily, usually so brave, told me she saw the old lady sitting in her rocking chair, watching her play with her dolls. "She just sat there," Lily said, her voice small, and she smiled at me. But it wasn't a happy smile. Tom, when confronted with the kids' stories, finally started to waver. He still tried to rationalize it: active imaginations, sleep deprivation, new house jitters. But the fear in the children's eyes was too real to ignore. The climax of our terror came one night, a night I will never forget as long as I live. I woke up to a chillingly familiar sound: the soft, deliberate footsteps pacing directly above us. But this time, they weren't confined to Mrs. Vance's old bedroom. They moved. They moved from her room, down the hallway, and then, inexplicably, into Lily's room. My heart leaped into my throat. I nudged Tom, desperate. "Tom, do you hear that? It's in Lily's room." He stirred, groggy. "Hear what?" "You're just dreaming, honey." "No," I hissed, scrambling out of bed. Footsteps. And they just went into Lily's room. Before he could fully wake, I was already out of our bedroom and sprinting down the hall, my bare feet slapping against the polished wooden floor. The sounds were louder now, a distinct shuffle and creak, followed by a soft, mournful humming. I burst into Lily's room, my eyes wide with terror. And there she was, Mrs. Vance, standing directly over Lily's bed. Lily was sound asleep, thankfully, oblivious. The old woman was leaning over her, her translucent hand hovering inches above Lily's face. Her eyes, those watery blue eyes, were filled with a profound sadness, and she was humming a faint, melancholic tune, like an old lullaby. My breath hitched. "Get away from her!" I screamed, my voice raw and loud in the silent house. Mrs. Vance didn't flinch. She slowly, so slowly, turned her head. Her gaze met mine, and for the first time, I felt something other than just presence or sadness. I felt a flicker of something else, something I couldn't quite name, perhaps resentment, or even anger. Then, she straightened up, her humming fading. She looked from Lily to me, then back to Lily, a profound sigh escaping her spectral lips. And then, she simply dissipated. Vanished. Like mist in the morning sun. Tom, who had finally stumbled out of our room, stood in the doorway, his eyes wide, his face ashen. He had heard my scream, and he had seen the way the air shimmered and then settled where she had been. "What was that?" he whispered, his voice trembling. I walked over to Lily's bed, my legs still shaking, and gently touched her forehead. She was warm, her breathing even. Unharmed. That, I said, my voice barely audible, was Mrs. Vance. And she's not leaving. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat in the living room, huddled together, the kids asleep on the sofa, their little faces pale even in their dreams. Tom finally understood. He saw the terror in my eyes, the fear in the children's faces. He knew I wasn't crazy. The next morning, we called the real estate agent. We told her we were breaking the contract. She was bewildered, asking for explanations, but we couldn't give her one she'd understand. How do you explain that your perfect, amazingly preserved house is still occupied by its previous owner, a woman who appears in every room, a spectral presence that watches your children sleep? We moved out within the week, leaving most of our belongings behind. The thought of going back into that house, even for our possessions, was unbearable. As we drove away, I looked back at the grand old house, sitting silently under the afternoon sun. It looked peaceful, serene, almost welcoming. But I knew better. I knew that somewhere within those beautifully preserved walls, Mrs. Elenor Vance was still there, meticulously arranging teacups, gently rocking in a chair, and perhaps, humming her mournful lullaby to the empty room she still called home. And I prayed that no one else would ever be fooled by its beauty, no one else would ever buy that house and experience the chilling, silent presence of its eternal resident.